Kansas City. I'm Serenity. Today we have poet Michael Davar Long. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm well. How are you?
All right. We're going to talk about a little bit about your poetry.
Okay.
I know you've been on the network before,
Mhm.
and you were talking about your community events, so we're going to get
Okay.
into your poetry. So tell us a little bit about how you got into writing poetry.
Writing poetry started for me in 1997. I was in college and I had gotten injured and just found myself with myself, trying to really sort some things out. I was going through some pretty serious life changes as far as coming to some spiritual consciousness, dealing with typical college life, a lot of extracurricular activities.
Partying.
Oh yeah, a little bit of that. But was really seeking for meaning at that time, and so poetry just became a outlet, interestingly, that I was able to pour myself into, because a lot of my teammates played college football. They didn't want to hear what I was talking about. Man, it's going on and stuff. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
do
know
that with you later.
most of your poetry is based on political issues and views.
Political, cultural, spiritual, and typically at that time it was really spiritual, because I had found something I had never found before. I just discovered spiritual consciousness, and so a lot of my poetry dealt with that. And they used to call me the good Reverend Doctor up in college. So they clown me a little bit, but they respected and loved me, and I still love my college teammates, and I still talk with some of them. But poetry just really was something that took off for me. So it just became more of a natural outlet, finding my voice, and a gift that was given to me. So it was truly a blessing to find that and to use poetry as a means of expression to really share what I have discovered to be, truth. Yeah.
So who would you say inspires you as a poet?
My poetry is inspired by the likes of Amiri Baraka, certainly, Hakeem Matabuti or Don Lee, who was a Black Power poet during the Black Arts Movement, shall I say, with Amiri Baraka. You can go back to Langston Hughes, Melvin Tolson, which was a poet from Moberly, Missouri, who was the main character of the movie The Great Debaters, the instructor.
Oh, okay.
He was actually a Harlem Renaissance poet. Melvin Tolson from Moberly, a big influence. Of course, you got like Saul Williams, Queen God Is, Omi Congo Debanga out of Maryland. My sister, oh my goodness, out of Detroit. She's been here a couple times. I forgot her name. She's Kara Moore, Jessica Kara Moore.
Yeah.
Sonny Patterson is, another definitely inspiring poet. And then locally, of course, Bonafide G, Gino Morrow being from Kansas City, Lou Moulton, two more elder statesmen that have been mentors and big inspirations for me are Lloyd Daniel and Maurice Copeland. So I really appreciate their voice and their views and the way that they put their truth into their writing and really, move people with their poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has to be moving for me to really be inspiring. I like substance. You know what I'm saying? I've done my share of erotic poetry in the past, but I've gotten to a state.
I never knew you did erotic.
Back in the day, single days,
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, poetry, as I've looked at it, historically, it really has a role of bringing change. So that's kind of why I write now. It's just, to bring some change. It makes sense of the world and myself.
Speaking of that, most of your poems are usually more political,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you started doing community events.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little about what you're doing in the community now.
Well, recently we've put on about, 3 presentations for the community. The first one was called The Solution, and we were really wanting to get the Black community particularly to understand our identity and our role in world history, past, present, and future, to just make a reconciliation of what we've experienced and where we are today and how to get back to center, So our first presentation was called The Solution. And they're all really biblically based. Everything we do is based on scriptural principles and things like that. The second presentation that we did was called Understanding the Black Experience in America Through the Bible. And so we looked at the history of our experience, particularly in America, and how prophetically and historically that lined up to demonstrate who we are, as identified by the Bible. And then just recently, past 2 weeks ago, on what was that, Sunday in February, we had a Black History program called "The Bible is Black History," and we really demonstrated how the Bible itself is actually Black history. And so those are 3 events that we've put on with the camp I fellowship with, and then a greater assembly of some other different camps that we fellowship with. But we're having another assembly coming up, or event coming up this month in March on the 22nd. That's called "Protecting Your Temple in the Spirit of Health." And we're going to be going over pretty much biblical principles of maintaining and restoring health, as well as understanding the body as a temple biblically, and what that means. And we're really going to flesh that out and really look into the symbology that the scriptures have in there as relates to the temple in our body, and how to really, make sure that we're keeping it in optimal health, because our community is suffering from health.
Yes, definitely.
So we definitely want to present some information as relates to that through a biblical basis. So yeah, but just trying to give back to the community in ways that I know would benefit the community as a whole. Right now, we're really looking at providing information.
Right.
We're on the information front right now, and that's crucial. So just using the gift that I've used as far as with poetry, public speaking, to really present in a different fashion with a different focus and a different message. So yeah,
I know you have also said that poets are community changers. Or tell us a little bit about your background on that, or why you think that.
I mean, you can look throughout history, particularly there's a movement you can look at all the movements that have been involved, as far as even in America, Harlem Renaissance, the artists, visual artists, dance, but poetry, particularly in the Harlem Renaissance, is what stands out, with Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, Richard Wright, these
Richard Wright's my favorite.
definitely these poets use their voice to combat the negative stereotypes and images of Black Americans during the 20s and 30s, and poetry was a major fulcrum of change for that. Then you can fast forward to the 60s, and you can look at the Black Arts movement with Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni, so on and so forth, Hakeem Matabuti, who was Don Lee. They did the same thing.
Right.
But this is not just limited to America. When you go to the west coast of Africa, and you look at the Francophonic speaking, or the people where France colonized Africa, there was a negritude movement that was founded by a man named Aimé Césaire, who just passed about 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago. But he used surrealistic poetry, which Andre Breton, I believe he was of France, came up with, and he just challenged the whole structure of poetry from a Western perspective. How they had pretty much dominated the mindset, the ideologies of African peoples. The French influence dominated the African people, but they used poetry to break the mold and really get back to an indigenous ideological perspective. And so poetry has been used all over the world to challenge the status quo.
Right.
And I think of another poet by the name of Federico Garcia Lorca, who actually was a martyr. He was martyred, as a matter of fact, for his vocalization of dealing with the dominant society, as far as the elite is concerned. He really challenged the status quo that the elite had established in Spain. He was a Spanish poet. And so, to me, poetry has always been an agent of change, and you look even in scripture, the prophets are considered poets, and I have a poem that talks about that, the book of Psalms, indeed. I mean, but even the prophetic books, when you're dealing with the utterances of the prophets, it's almost poetic when you hear it in its indigenous language. When you hear it read in Hebrew, there's a flow to it, and it's just a beautiful language. Hebrew is just a beautiful language, but when you really see that they are inspired to write and to speak, which is poetry in its purest, you can kind of see that carry over into spoken word, and even if you go to the root of spoken word, which are the Jelés or the griots of West Africa, you have these entertainers. They're not entertainers so much, but they're historians who use poetry to capture the history of their village and to tell stories down to future generations. The griot, which was the spoken word artists, the djembes, they played all their dancers even, but they captured the history of their village or of their tribe, and they continued it through the oral tradition. So oral tradition has been huge, particularly in the African tradition. And so, yeah, man, it's powerful how poetry is used as an agent of change, throughout society.
So definitely. What upcoming projects do you have going on with poetry? I know you were doing something with within the hip hop community as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
poetry first. I was working with Prospero's bookstore. Jason Reinberg in particular, we were going to do a book. I was going to work with them to publish a new book, but I think I'm going to go a self-publishing route. I'm thinking more of that route right now, in all honesty. So I'm in the process of putting together my 5th self-published book. So I think I'm going to do that.
Do you have a name for that book?
I do.
Oh, you're going to wait on it?
I do, yeah. You can check out Pensurrection, though, on Amazon.com. That's my previously published book, Pensurrection, like insurrection, but Pensurrection. So you can look it up on the Michael Davar Long on Amazon.com. So I'm working on a new book. I got pretty much it all the poems selected. I just got to format it right now. Right. I'm also working on a book of essays that I've compiled, I've written over this past year, maybe past 3 years. And so it's going to be a 2-volume work, actually. So that's in the process of coming out hopefully this year. I have Gino Morrow writing the introduction to the book of essays. And so that should be out hopefully sometime this year.
I know you're working on some project with some people out of town, writing some letters or something.
Yeah, that's with my my comrade, Minister Paul Scott out of North Carolina. It's called Black Talmudim. And we are pretty much just the vanguard of really preserving hip-hop culture and really keeping hip-hop more rooted and not exploited like it's been, like with series like Empire and what it's doing with the community. And really just kind of, just continuing to portray blacks in a negative light, so we're really challenging the entertainers and the artists to really, keep the standard of artistry, at a level that is not going to continue to just run our people through the muck, we don't need this anymore. You look at what's taking place this past summer and even presently, with all these, police murders of these young black men, you think we'd still be aware and conscious of this stuff and not continue to criminalize our race in the image, that is being promoted through hip hop. And so we have a theme song that my college roommate Uriah Eliash Ben Israel put out. It's called Black Talmudim. You can check that out on Facebook. You can check it out on a blog that I host to, Hebrew Vision News. So you can check that out there.
So how does somebody get in contact with you? You have a blog, Facebook,
man. Yeah, right.
Twitter? Why don't you tell
Twitter. My Twitter handler is @Davar the Poet. Facebook is Michael Davar Long. You can email me at davarthepoet@yahoo.com. That's pretty much some of the most effective ways to get in contact with me because, I'm pretty social with the media myself,
Social media?
Social media. Yeah, I like to network, build, on some things like that. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Serenity reminding you to spit your piece.
Spit your piece.
CMG wants you to always remember, the victory we call success goes to the best prepared. When you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Thanks.